So we're going to go ahead and get started. And this is going to be more of a question and answer time period. Steve Plymel is going to be the moderator and is going to kind of help keep the conversation going. Melissa Coulston is right here. You can see her. We'll maybe make her, you can make her that screen the biggest if you so choose, so you can see her better.
You can switch spots, maybe. You're good.
So she's going to maybe be answering some questions, and she may come up with some things that she thinks is important to share as well. So we want it to be more of you all asking questions of her. We have a list of ones that we may ask if need be, but we really want it to come from you. I want to introduce a little bit about her if you don't already know, and I'm going to let her tell you more. She is a partnership coordinator with Kentucky Refugee Ministry, and so some of you may have already been familiar with her role. She works, of course, closely with Mary Cobb, the executive director who spoke in the service on July 13th. So I know many of you were there, heard her, and were touched by her stories, because I saw some of you come to the table and share that with her. We have been in a relationship with KRM for some of you that do not know. Jeffrey Minnick and Vicki have been in charge of helping to set up 2 apartments for refugees in the past. And right now, of course, that's suspended, and she may talk more about that. And also KRM and others came and spoke at the Lexington Outreach Network meeting earlier in the spring that was hosted here at Central. So many of us have had contact with KRM in one form or another. So I'm going to stop talking and let you all ask any questions. Oh, I would recommend that you mute yourself until you have a question, so that any kind of background noise doesn't get picked up in the recording, and we can make sure that we only hear questions. Okay.
Why don't we begin by asking Melissa to tell us a little bit about the work that she does with the KRM.
Sure. Thank you so much to everybody that is here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I know Mary was looking forward to talking with you, and she's so swamped with getting things ready to propose for budgets that I haven't even talked to her. But we're really grateful for the ongoing partnership that we've had with Central Christian over the years. And it's just, I love doing stuff like this because it is a big part of what we need to do in the community to educate people and just raise awareness about what's going on and bring in more supporters. Because I think there's a lot about refugee resettlement, immigration writ large, that is just so complicated and overwhelming. And I always say that I can get into the weeds really quickly. So I'll try not to do that too much tonight. But it is like I'm one sentence away from being into acronyms and very specialized language, but we will keep it straightforward tonight. Do the best I can. But if there's ever anything that I mention that you don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to do whatever you need to do to let me know if I've lost you along the way. So I've been at KRM for about 3.5 years now. And before that, in my previous lifetime, I was a librarian at Jessamine County and at the state archives. But while I was at Jessamine County, I was working there part-time, and I also was working as a contractor for Episcopal Migration Ministries, which is we work with Church World Service to do as a national partner, but EMM is used to be another national resettlement agency up until about a month or 2 ago. So part of what I did was help to educate Episcopalians about refugee resettlement. So that's kind of how I got into when I left the state. This position was open at KRM, and I was like, you know what, I think I could do that. I know a little bit about refugee resettlement. I know some of the things. I just need to learn about it at KRM. So a big part of what I do is get out in the community. If people ask me what my job is, I say community engagement. But engagement is also building partnerships and bringing in support, whether that's in-kind donations, advocacy, money, whatever it is. We've got volunteers and partnerships with different organizations to do different things. So a lot of what I'm out there doing is just letting people know what's going on, keeping them updated, and then maintaining those relationships. But like many nonprofits, I also run the social media and do a lot of our graphic design and fundraising and all kinds of, sometimes I'm at the reception desk. You never know what we're going to need at KRM in a day. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I taught some children about portraits, self-portraits, because I'm also have a degree in art history, and we were running an art camp for kids over the summer. So that's one of the great things about KRM is we can jump in where you need people and help out in whatever way is necessary. So a lot of different things that we do at KRM.
I was really impressed with the statement that KRM put out regarding explaining what they do, explaining what you do. And one of the sentences is that through KRM, that is, we members of the community, encourage hope, advocate for newcomers, and transform the lives of those seeking safety. And given that reality, that goal, I'm wondering, that on July 3rd, the House and the Senate passed this so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And even though we still don't know exactly what all is in it or what it might do, has it had any impact so far, or do you anticipate impact because of that?
So it has already had some impact, but the bigger impacts are going to come later with the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, which will go into effect in 2026. And SNAP at this point has been cut off for all non-citizens that don't have green cards, but the states have a 4-month window in which to enact that. So we still have, we actually got one of the cases that we were supposed to get in January. She just arrived a couple of weeks ago. And I think she was able to apply for SNAP and get approved. So they're still approving people, even though they aren't going to be eligible once Kentucky kind of catches up with the ball. So the SNAP restrictions, the eligibility restrictions are, as soon as Kentucky cuts that off, that will be huge. Because that's as you know, a lifeline for a lot of people. And then we are looking to the future about a year out where refugees that don't have green cards, even though they're eligible for green cards, not everybody has one. What if they don't have a green card, they won't be eligible for Medicaid or Medicare. And then there are additional restrictions for people that have insurance through the exchange, through Obamacare. So those 3 programs are, again, really will be devastating for a lot of people. So a lot of what we are going to be working on is getting people green cards that are eligible for them. But it's one of the things that has already gone into effect, aside from the SNAP restrictions, is they have either raised the fees or instituted new fees for a bunch of different immigration applications. So the green card application fee went up. There's a fee now to apply for asylum. And then you have to keep paying. I can't remember what the fee structure looks like, if it's every 6 months or every year, but as long as your asylum case is pending, you have to pay a fee. I think if you get a work permit while you're applying for asylum, you have to pay every 6 months to keep that valid. And it's $250. It's not nothing, right? It's a decent amount of money. Whereas before, someone seeking asylum who has been persecuted, there wasn't a fee to apply. So now they're adding things, and those are already in effect. And so they're making these processes higher barriers for everybody across the board. And then really, like we say, with many things around money, the people with the least money are the most exploited, right? And the most shut out of stuff. So the one that broke my heart was fees for applying for special special immigrant juvenile status, SIJS. Again, so many acronyms. But that particular status is for children who have been neglected or abused and are seeking protection from the United States. Now there's a fee to apply for that. And you basically have to have an attorney to be able to be successful in that situation. So, you know, it's just like very unhospitable, verging on a hostile situation for a lot of these folks.
What are some of those fees running? What
Hundreds,
amounts?
if not thousands.
That's what I was afraid of. Yeah, I think I'd seen something in the thousands for
And
one of them.
then there's also the, like, if you've been ordered to leave, like if you have a final order of removal or deportation or whatever it is, they're trying to institute a daily fee of $998 if you don't leave by the time they tell you to. So like there's just layers upon layers of the cruelty, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And this is all new.
Yeah, like I said, some of the fees were already there, like applying for a green card has always cost some money, but for fees that already existed, a lot of them were raised. Some less so and some more so. So by $100 or a couple $100. But when you're already, you know, living in poverty, trying to get somewhere, you know, those fees they can be a really big barrier for a lot of people. Especially if you have like 6 or 7 children who need to apply for a green card, you have to pay for every single person. And it's not any surprise that people aren't able to do that for several years.
And you said that there were fees for even for children who are escaping situations of abuse.
Yep, that one is new. It didn't used to cost anything to apply for that status, but now it does. I don't remember how much, but that is one of the things that I know they implemented.
Do you all have a fund within your budget or something that helps pay with those, or how does that pay? It helps people pay for those fees, or
We have limited funding to help assist people with green card applications at low cost. And so we have one attorney on staff, and we just got another grant from the Kentucky Bar Foundation to help subsidize the legal fees so that we can do the application with the family or with the client at a way reduced rate than what they would have to pay to a private attorney. But I don't think it subsidizes the cost of the actual application itself. It just helps with the legal fees.
I'm looking up some of these fees. It looks like the fee for temporary protected status is going up from 50 to 500.
Yeah, so some of them it's an order of magnitude, but some it's just, you know, $100 or $200.
Yeah. Yeah, it says asylum is 100 initially, and then there's $100 annual fee, like you were saying.
$100 annual
Yeah.
fee. Which you can't even get a work permit until you've been here for 6 months
Right.
while you're applying for asylum. Like it's just
It's silly.
it's a lot.
What kind of questions do you all have?
I was wondering about volunteer opportunities.
Excellent. We would love to have volunteers. So we have an onboarding process that some of our folks here have done the full process. The first Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. at our office, and then our volunteer coordinator also does some like random online orientations as well. I think she's actually doing one today. If she's got a group of people that just can't seem to make it in person, she'll set one up. And that orientation goes through some of the history of resettlement, what it meant prior to January, what we do, the different services we offer, and then some of those volunteer opportunities. Most of our volunteer opportunities are for individuals or like small numbers of people. We don't really have opportunities for groups, or even definitely not for big groups. That can be really hard for us to accommodate. But it's like once you do the orientation and do the background check, submit your paperwork, then you can kind of hop in wherever might work for you. And right now, most of the things that we have on a regular ongoing basis is we do grocery deliveries to some of our clients. We pick up food from food chain and take it out to wherever they are. I know in the fall, we're going to be starting up, we already have a story time going for women with, or people with little children, like non-school age kids, don't have to be women. But as we tacked on a women's group to that, so there was a support group that would happen right after story time. So it was mostly women that would bring their kids. But in addition to those, so those we had volunteer, and like the library would come in once a month, and the Carnegie Center would come in once a month and do that kind of thing. But we'll also be starting like open conversation time to practice English alongside like open tutoring for school age children of any age. And we're hoping to do that once a week, and we'll need a fair amount of volunteer support for that as well. So I'm really excited about both of those programs, and I think just getting people into the office is very helpful.
Is there any kind of training that you need to have to do tutoring?
No, I think we might have some like helpful hints, but we're trying to get like high school kids and other people, like we could try and match you with someone who is working on something that you feel comfortable with. we're not gonna put you with like a kid that's doing calculus if you were like,
Okay, good. I would not be able to help.
I was thinking the same, Catherine.
and some kids, it might just be like, I'll sit next to you while you work on your stuff and I can tell you it looks great, but we're not going to worry about that quite yet. I think just having more adults around to like do activities or help with homework or do whatever will be good.
At one time you had a chorus, or was that just the kids from Congo or something?
We did have a choir, yeah, the refugee choir, and there have been whispers about trying to restart that, but it is quite the endeavor. And I don't know if the time is quite right, but we'll see what happens in the next few months.
I'm curious as to the level of anxiety among your participants regarding ICE. Are there particular blocks of people that you sense are being feeling extremely marginalized and in dangerous positions?
I think the populations that we work with are less vulnerable. I mean, they're still vulnerable because they're not, for the most part, citizens. Then, like, we don't work with that many undocumented people. We have a few programs that are open to undocumented folks, but most of our clients are refugees or people with other statuses that make them eligible for what we provide. I think I don't have as much interaction with our clients. And once they're not eligible for our services, like with humanitarian parole, that's mostly Cubans and Haitians, as well as Ukrainians. And there are other populations that have humanitarian parole, but they don't come to us necessarily. They're not here in Lexington. They're more elsewhere. But the Cubans and the Haitians, I don't hear as much from the Ukrainian population about it, but I have seen with the Haitian population, the folks, because the government has revoked humanitarian parole. They've also revoked TPS, which is another big one for a lot of the Haitian community, which is temporary protected status, like you mentioned. TPS is different, and for a lot of those folks, it's a temporary thing. that usually is a result of, in response to like a natural disaster. Like the earthquake was a big one. So people that are in the United States, when a natural disaster happens and they can't go back, the United States will sometimes offer them this temporary protected status. And then it can be renewed every 18 months or 2 years, depending on what the situation is. And often what has happened, and this has been going on for 25, 30 years, those TPS designations are just continually renewed every 18 months or whatever. And then you've got people that have been here for 30 years. And then what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, the Trump administration is revoking those protections, revoking the status for TPS and humanitarian parole. And I've heard specifically from one of my contacts in the Haitian community that he's hearing from people that are they've had their work permits revoked. They're being kicked out of their housing. They don't know what they're gonna do. They're in a U-Haul driving around town. And he's calling, asking us for resources around housing and food, like, so there is a lot of that happening. And by a lot, I mean some,
Mhm.
We have not a whole lot of ICE activity in Lexington, from what I have heard. Most of the enforcement is happening at the courthouse, which, they can do. But we are not seeing like the level of raids and things like that other communities are. So I don't have a great answer for that. I think there is a decent amount of anxiety out there. I'm just not as well plugged into serving the undocumented community as other organizations are. So most of what I'm hearing is like third hand.
Right.
So yeah. I think
Talking about people being kicked out of their houses,
Mhm.
Kicked out by whom?
By the landlords.
And the landlord is moving against them because,
If they don't have a work permit, they're not allowed to work, and they don't have legal status, they can evict them.
well, it boils down to a financial situation.
I'm sure that's part of it.
Or if they were in Section 8 housing, they may have lost
I don't know that we have
those
many,
funds.
I don't know
Yeah.
that we have many,
in those, yeah.
at least not of our clients,
Mhm.
because it is so hard to get into government housing
Mhm.
programs. That a lot of the folks that we have worked with have arrived within the last 2 years.
Gotcha.
So they just haven't been here long enough. But I think the family that my friend was talking to me about, I think they had humanitarian parole, but it's like Walmart was notified that anybody with this status, it was revoked, so they fired them all. Like everybody was told not to come in, and that they no longer had legal status. So it's not just like Kroger or something. Like this is kind of happening at a high level, where these organizations, these companies are employing a lot of people, and they know who has had their status revoked and things like that.
Judy, did you have a question? Judy, you're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you. Judy, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. So I don't understand how you have any clients. When you talk about all these barriers, it's like, and you keep hearing about people having to leave, and I'm thinking, who's left? What percentage of what you had before this all started happening are left for you to even offer services to through this organization? Do you see what I'm saying? It seems like they'd all be gone.
So
They can't afford. It's too overwhelming to even stay and think about that much money.
it's a lot. The folks that we will likely be serving for the most part moving forward are refugees. So refugees, their status can't be taken away unless they've committed a crime, which refugees do commit crimes as well. That is something that happens, but at a lower rate than regular old Americans. But refugees, when they come to the United States, they are eligible for services under our federal grants for up to 5 years after their arrival. So we've welcomed like 3,000 refugees over the past 5 years, and they're all still eligible for our services. Also, we will be adding other sources of income that are less status restricted. So we will be opening up more to the community, to the wider community. So like programs like our legal assistance, our victims advocacy program, and our program, our therapy for survivors of torture program, those are all already open up to anyone in the community. Some of them are status, like you have to be an immigrant. It's unlikely that anybody who isn't an immigrant would need green card assistance, but like our victims advocacy program, you can even be a citizen and still receive support from our victims advocate. The survivors of torture program is open to anyone in the community, but you have to have been a survivor of torture. So, it's a limited group of people. So we'll be doing more things like that. The art camp that we just did, we promoted that to the English language schools close to where we were holding it, and we weren't restricting it to anybody. Like, you didn't have to be a KRM client to attend that. So we'll be doing more things like that as well, because our funding will be less restricted in the future.
Melissa, the last
Go ahead,
I heard, the last I heard, there was a pause on refugees coming in. Did the bill that passed on July 3rd, did that get relaxed, or when do we anticipate that might change? What's the status of that?
A good question. We do not expect the status of that to change, and nothing was done in that bill to relax it at all. And in fact, the rescission bill that they just passed last week, clawing back more money, took money out of the accounts that fund resettlement services once folks are here. So we work with the State Department, or used to, and funding through them would pay for the services that we provide once people get here. And that was one of the accounts that was drained by the rescissions package. The ongoing lawsuit filed partly by our partner Church World Service is challenging the legality of the president completely suspending refugee resettlement. But unfortunately, the Refugee Act from 1980 doesn't specify a minimum. It only says that the president sets the ceiling, so the highest number of refugees that can be brought in a year. And they are also allowed to decide who is a refugee. So that's what we're seeing with the invitations for white Afrikaners from South Africa, granting them refugee status in the United States. So I don't expect that to change during this administration. If it were going to, I would have expected to see more pushback, but we're not seeing that really at all.
So how about language? How about people that only speak English? How much use is there for them? Art camps, I can see, but so many of these services require the ability to communicate.
So you're saying for people who don't speak English, like how do we work
For
with them?
volunteers?
For volunteers.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. So for the English conversation practice, that's part of the deal. You work on practicing, and there will be we'll have resources available for any volunteers that want to help out with that. So it's not just like a free for all, whatever the person wants to talk about. If they want to do that, that's great. But if you want to have like a worksheet or something, flashcards or whatever, we'll have some resources there. But as some of our former co-sponsor team members, welcome team members may have met folks with limited English, we make it work. And if we need to communicate about really important things, then we get an interpreter. But that's kind of the way it works. We're not going to just like send you out on your own to talk to somebody who doesn't speak any English. We'll prepare you or set you up for success.
I just thought maybe it might be required in some, and somebody would be pretty much not effective if they couldn't speak Spanish, for instance. So you answered my question. You answered my question.
That's great.
Let me ask you, what do you think are common misconceptions that people have with regard to immigrants and refugees?
That's a good question. I wrote down some notes, so I'm going to pull up my notes so I don't forget anything. Because I think common misconceptions. I think the biggest misconception that I run into in the community is people thinking that we can only help new arrivals for like 3 months or something like that, when it's really up to that 5 years after they get here. I think there's also sort of the biggest thing that we run into is like, well, we're just giving them a handout kind of thing. There's a lot of like economic misconceptions where it's like, they'll never be able to work. How will they ever survive? They need us to help them do everything. When that's really not the case. Often what we is that there may be a significant language barrier, but the folks that we work with are adults who have gotten here on their own, have fled whatever terrible situation they've been through. And once we can kind of get them on their feet, they make choices on their own, and that's what we're here to help them do, right? Our role is not to hold people's hand and make decisions for them. Our role is to help them identify their options and pick the best way forward for them and their families. So that's why we talk a lot about self-sufficiency, because if you're not self-sufficient, it's a lot harder to make those choices. Your options are much more limited. So we're always working to help people be self-sufficient, not need to rely on the whims of government and charity, and be able to support their family on their own. Not only support their family on their own, but also be able to go out into the community and get what they need. So that looks like going to the school and doing a school enrollment, or talking to a teacher who is having some sort of issue, or whatever it looks like. Getting yourself to the food stamps office, to the DMV, advocating for yourself, and if you need us, we're always there, kind of thing. But it's that like being able to manage your own life and know where to go, who to talk to if you have a problem or an emergency, and be able to get on with your life, because you're not always going to be a refugee, right? We talk a lot about former refugees, because once you're resettled and you get integrated, like a lot of people, that is their previous life. They have a new home here. So I think that's a big part of it, is like, these people are never going to integrate and they're always going to be so different. And yeah, but like, that's the beauty of the diversity that we all have. Like, we're all different from each other. We all have different backgrounds and perspectives. It's just theirs is in a different language, and the culture can be very, very different from what we're used to. But in my mind, that makes us stronger, and we all benefit. But I think the other thing that I run into a lot, and something that I struggle with when I talk about what we do and who we serve, is talking about like deserving and worthiness and value. Like, we end up talking a lot about economic benefit. Like, our economy does better. We have seen it in multiple studies over the years. The data is there to back it up, but I hate talking about people that way, because I don't think it's about deserving and undeserving and what I can get out of it, how I can benefit from helping someone. So that's the other thing that I'd like to mention is like, if that's the reason that we're doing resettlement and helping refugees and people seeking protection, then fine, but I don't necessarily agree with that as the main reason we need to do any of this. The only other thing that I'll mention is that the folks that we work with are still human. So like I said, refugees can make crimes. Refugees can be not very nice sometimes, but they can also be wonderful, delightful people, just the way all humans are. And one thing, I don't remember if it was this question or another question, might have been this: what have you learned from people you've helped resettle that's changed your own perspective? I don't remember. But I went to a conference many years ago, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I went to a session at this great conference about, the session was about why it's important to advocate for immigrants who have committed crimes and immigrants who are in detention. And I was like, well, of course we should. It blew my mind a little bit that those folks are also deserving of justice and also deserving of protection and safety, even if they have broken the social contract, right? So I'm just gonna put that out there, even though I'm getting away from the deserving and undeserving. You're deserving just because you're a fellow human on the planet, if you're asking me, but it's just me.
Are there communities of refugees or immigrants that are very helpful to help other people coming in from that same background? I mean, like the Ukrainian community or the Cuban community or the Mexican community or something like that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think Lexington is actually pretty special in a lot of ways in the world of resettlement, where at KRM, almost all of our refugee clients have what we call a US tie. So they, even overseas, they know somebody in Lexington, and the system, when we were doing resettlement, would on purpose relocate someone to where they already knew someone when possible. It's not always possible, but most offices around the country were getting people that don't know anybody in their community. So they're on their own, having to figure things out on their own, just with the help of the local community, the local resettlement agency. But almost all of our clients, almost all of our cases, it was rare that we would get a case that didn't have any kind of local tie. It's usually family, either close or distant. Like the case that we just got a couple weeks ago, her sister has been here for 10 years or something like that. Her sister's been here a long time, and there were like 20 other people at the airport from their family that were there to greet her. And that was a very common occurrence where, like, you never know who would show up at the airport, and sometimes there's 30 people with flowers and balloons, and that's great. But yeah, the different communities here are very, it's easy for people to plug in and get support, get guidance, get assistance once they're here. There's also a flip side of that sometimes, where it's a small community, so you know, there's always drama.
I remember the Congolese family that we did, which was the first family, that there was a good number of folks that greeted her and prepared a native meal. We were going to bring something in, but they wanted to fix for her. I remember her, she had traveled all day. She looked like a deer in the headlight, and 2 small children with her, and but to be, you know, embraced by people she knew, or at least knew of her, I think made a big difference.
Absolutely.
We've had this question off and on from different people, maybe not tonight, the difference between a welcoming community and a sanctuary city. And I know that that word has been used differently over the years, sanctuary city. So I don't know if that's a misconception, or does that add to difficulty, or does that have anything at all to do with what you all do? or the reception of the folks.
I think that both of those terms are like municipal terms, or they're like government related, right? So we don't deal with it really at all. But there's a lot of confusion around it because they mean different things. Even sanctuary as an idea, coming out of faith communities, getting sanctuary within churches and things like that. There's just so many different meanings. And even according to the Trump administration, there's a bunch of different meanings on their list of sanctuary cities. But it is a hot topic because today Louisville has decided to change their municipal policies to seek to be removed from that list that the Trump administration put out of sanctuary cities, which I think would lead to, like, being on that list would lead to funding cuts and other negative consequences. So Louisville actually today just announced, the mayor announced that they would be changing their policy. And the policy that they were changing was how much notice they would give ICE if they had someone in police custody that had what's called an ICE detainer associated with them. So that just means ICE puts out some sort of notification that says, hey, would you hold on to this person while we come, we get there. Hold on to them until we get there, kind of thing. And so what Louisville had in place was they would give them 5 to 12 hours notice before they were going to release someone from police custody if they had an ICE detainer on them. But now they will give 48 hours notice. So it's not like they're holding on to people for weeks or months. That's all that really meant in terms of Louisville. For other cities, it may be more active resistance to working with ICE, but it usually centers around this detainer working with, like, local police integrating their systems with ICE. And then there's the whole other, they have a new way for localities, whether it's jails, police, sheriff's offices. Now those entities can volunteer to work more directly with ICE. And we've got several of those entities in Kentucky and around the country that I think it's in the hundreds now, where different jails, police forces, I forget, there's several different designations where they can either just like be more directly in contact, or they could actually all the way up to being deputized by ICE to do immigration enforcement, which is questionable in its legality, if you're asking me. But that's a whole nother separate thing that's like on the other end of the spectrum away from sanctuary policies. And then welcoming is a whole different thing that was just created by a nonprofit to encourage municipalities to be more accommodating to people.
What about the city of Lexington?
So Lexington, our government cooperates in the sense like Louisville does now, where we will comply with the ICE detainer. If the police have someone in custody that has an ICE detainer, they will let ICE know and release that person into ICE custody. But we're not signing those 287G agreements, if you need to know the specifics. We haven't signed any of those or volunteered to be more directly supportive of ICE. I think a lot of what Lexington seems to be doing is kind of walking the tightrope, where they're not trying to draw too much attention, and they're also not trying to get more involved. They're not volunteering for stuff.
I have a question about looking at a quite different issue, that is getting involved in the workforce. How difficult is it? And is Lexington a good place for moving into the work community? Certainly that would bring in money and give them status in the community.
I think what we've seen is there are pluses and minuses, right? Like the more English a person has, the easier time they have getting a job. Like that's across the board a factor. It's just a big factor. If they have a lot of, like, it is easy to get a job if you have a decent amount of English. So we find that in general, Lexington is pretty welcoming. If you don't speak English or have other barriers to self-sufficiency, like health problems or single parent, stuff like that, those barriers are there for anybody, regardless of your English level. It's just like another layer on top. So that's just hard in general. But I think there are several companies, organizations that we work with that are willing to hire people with lower English proficiency. But it's like what we tell folks is the quicker you learn it, the more you'll be able to earn in your job, and the quicker you'll be able to advance. So that's a big part of why I think regardless of what happens over the next couple of months, we're still going to be doing English classes as best we can, because we know that that is a big need for everyone as they get used to being in the United States. And it's a hard language to learn. So, the more we can do to help people learn quicker, the better. But
before we go any further, I have a question. There's a Catherine on, and I'm not sure who you are. We're glad you're with us, but it's Catherine with a C. Would you mind telling us?
Yeah, I'm here. I came in late. I'm Steve's sister.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Yes, I have met you. Yes.
Yes, at probably one of the protests.
Okay, so want to welcome you. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
I've got a question that may be totally unrelated. I've got a question that's totally maybe unrelated, because I came to this sort of like Catherine Olson was saying, I just want to find something to do to help. And I know sometimes people that want to help are more trouble than they're worth. And I don't want to be that way. I want to do something meaningful. But I want to ask a question just about the Kentucky Refugee Ministry. Maybe I'm not the only one that doesn't know this. You said it was a nonprofit, and I don't understand. I'd like to know how in Louisville it got started. And you've talked a little bit about funding through the attorneys and so on, but basically, what's the deal with it? How did it get going? I'm just curious. And maybe I'm the only one here that has that low level of knowledge about it, but if you have time, I'd like to hear a little bit.
Sure, yeah, I love talking about the history of KRM because it is specific to KRM and also something that we hear like similar stories across the country with resettlement agencies that have grown and closed and grown again, is that like the history of refugee resettlement in general, going back primarily to World War II, is that faith communities were the ones that did resettlement. So like my grandmother and her family fled Lithuania during World War II, and I found their ship manifest when I was working at the archives. I did a bunch of deep digging, and it had their sponsor listed on the ship manifest, and they were sponsored by the Catholics, which was it wasn't USCCB at the time, but it's the same organization. So my grandmother was really glad to know that, because she was very Catholic, and she was glad to know that the Catholics took care of them. But a lot of this work has grown out of faith communities. USCCB, Episcopalians, HIAS, the Jewish organization, like there's a lot of that. And as the program was codified into law in 1980 with the Refugee Act signed by Jimmy Carter, that was when we started to see nonprofits begin to coalesce and like support this process. So essentially the way that the program worked was that the State Department would contract this work out. So the government isn't doing resettlement, they're contracting it out to local resettlement agencies. And the national level agencies like CWS and EMN, most of those are faith-based still, but they have nonprofit wings that are able to contract with the federal government and do resettlement in a non-discriminatory way. KRM specifically started, I think, Louisville and Lexington. It's like our founders were interested Presbyterians. I don't remember if if Babs was Presbyterian, but like these very driven women at their kitchen tables with a phone and a pen and paper, because it was the 90s, just making it happen, right? And so in Louisville, it was started out of Highland Presbyterian, and our office in Louisville is actually housed in one of Highland Presbyterian's buildings. And I don't know exactly why we chose the name KRM, if it was out of that association with the Presbyterians, but we are a secular nonprofit as an organization, and it's a little bit misleading to have ministry as part of our name. But I think if you sort of separate the faith-based definitions of those words, like we're still ministering people, even though we don't specify religion or proselytize in any way. So that is how that worked. And Louisville was started in 1990. We started in 1998 and kept growing from there. Northern Kentucky was added in 2017. And we've all shrunk. I think Lexington by percentage has shrunk maybe the most. But we expect more of that to happen in the coming months. And it is, I think, one of the things that I noted in response to some of these questions is like, what are we losing? We're losing a lot of knowledge and smart people that have done this work for a long time. And it's really sad because it is hard work, but there are things that you learn along the way, you know, like with any job. We've been doing it for a long time and we're pretty good at it. And it's a real shame that we're not allowed to do that right now. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it really does answer. And you said it just then in those last few sentences about how you were sad that it has shrunk, because as we were talking, I was just wondering, how come this is being talked about like it's normal and it's like this is what we do there and everything, except what I keep hearing is that it's not happening. You know, it's not happening places in the United States. Now I see. And I remember the little churches I was a part of would have a refugee family come. The last church that I was from before I went to this one, that happened, but I didn't understand what was all behind it. I appreciate what you said about Jimmy Carter and the years that this happened and everything.
Well, and I think that that's one thing that the lawsuit that CWS and others filed around the suspension of the program, the Refugee Act, I think, I'm not a law expert, obviously I'm not a lawyer, but it is a really special law in the sense that it sets out an entire framework for what you have to do to resettle someone. So like the program is extensive. We had like the spreadsheets that we had and we were using. Beautiful. Like I'm very proud of the people that made them, but it was a whole framework from pre-arrival, which some of you have been involved in, through what you have to do at the airport, to what you have to do the next day, to what you have to do within 3 days, to what you have to do within the first week. Like there was a litany of things that you have to do for people that are resettled as refugees. And this is all outlined in the Refugee Act. So there is clear intent from Congress in this law that we as a nation should resettle refugees, and here's how you do it. Like there's a map. You just walk through it. Yeah, there's difficulties there, but you know, you gotta make sure people have food to eat. You gotta make sure they get their benefits applied for, get a state ID, get enrolled in English classes, get their kids enrolled in schools. Like the core services list, I think it was 16 or 17 things that we had to do within 3 months of arrival, plus everything that comes after that we can do to support people. And so it is like it was a really well-designed system, and it's a shame to see it attacked and also completely suspended, because it actually worked for a lot of people. You know, no system is perfect, but we found that with this little bit of support that we can give people at the beginning, very quickly they hit the ground running, very quickly they are able to be self-sufficient and go on and live their lives. But when you don't provide that kind of support at the beginning, yeah, people are going to have a lot of trouble. But the Refugee Act really set up that great framework upon which we could build.
Is your core funding or your federal funding, is there a core amount just to support the agency, or is it all based on a kind of a so much per person that you work with, or per family or whatever? That making sense?
So that's a little bit of a complicated question to answer. For the refugee resettlement program, we've got like 30 different grants that we have, maybe more. But for refugees specifically, a lot of that funding is per capita, so per person that is resettled. Part of the funding goes to the family and the KRM. Thank you. That funding comes to KRM because they aren't here yet, and we use that money to pay for. We would use that money to pay for rent, utilities, like the things that you need at the beginning, groceries, whatever. And then part of the funding does go to pay people at KRM to overhead. I think it was like 40% to KRM, 60% to the family. And it wasn't much. It was, I think by the time the program was suspended, families were getting like $1,200 per capita, which if you're a single person, that money's gone before you get here, because we've had to set up housing and buy groceries, utilities, all of that. But for larger families, they would be able to make different choices, and we would be able to like prepay their rent or prepay their utilities so that at least they would have that stable housing situation, and they could then use any money they earned or any money that they got through cash assistance to do other things. For other grants, there is a similar, like some of that pays for the programs themselves, some of that pays for people and overhead. It just kind of depends, but that for the initial resettlement program, that's kind of the easiest way to think about how it breaks down or broke down. I have a hard time speaking in the past tense. I can't let it go.
What kind of statement would you make with regard to how churches, how congregations could get involved here? I mean, you have talked a little bit about ways individuals can get involved and volunteer. What about congregations?
Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
So that's a great question, always. As is clear, we don't have the volunteer opportunities for like groups of co-sponsors or welcome teams because we don't have apartments to set up and things like that. I think that the best way, there are a lot of things that congregations can do. So raising money is always great. Doing donations drives always great. What I love to see with congregations are, like we've had with you all, ongoing relationships where there's information exchange, where if you guys are like, hey, we've got some extra capacity, what do you need? And we can let you know, kind of, like a back and forth partnership. Mm-hmm. Or, you all want to learn something and we can come in and educate. Advocacy is also great. Learning more about these issues like you all are doing now is helpful, even if it's just for your own personal benefit. now you know more. I think what we're seeing, one of the questions that you all sent me was like, what are we seeing in other communities that faith communities are doing? One thing that EMM is doing, actually, they're holding a weekly half-hour webinar of just like updates in general. And they have invited a few different Episcopal congregations on to talk about what's going on locally, especially in Los Angeles. And what they're talking a lot about are training people up to do accompaniment, whether that is like going with someone to their court hearing or learning to be accompaniment, kind of like CASA, where you're a victim's advocate kind of thing, where Connie McNeely, our friend here, she used to work with our victims advocates. Like you can do specialized things. Also just like signing on to faith community stuff, like letters to your representatives, amplifying issues as they come up. We try to put those out. Church World Service does a lot of that as well. I would assume.
Yeah, I'm trying to share it. We signed on to the Good Friday Declaration.
Yeah.
So,
and then, you know, like there are lots of creative things to do too. Like we had a pickleball tournament in January, and one that I heard recently, coming to our events and dropping off donuts on a Friday. I don't know. Like there are lots of things that congregations can do to help raise awareness, help raise support. You all already do so much. After I got the tour downstairs, I'm floored with all that you all do. And I think even maybe taking a look at your procedures and assumptions about your communities that you're serving and how to make those more accessible for immigrants and non-English speakers. If that's something that you could look at. I encourage that out of everybody, so I'm not like picking on you. I mentioned that to
big international stoppers in the job, especially.
Yeah. Like that.
Out of that, I will remind people that the community closet on Saturdays, we serve a lot of people who come in who are, we don't know if they're refugees or what, but they're foreign, and they come in to get clothes and to get all kinds of things. So we do that as we go through. That's a Saturday function for the church, and y'all may recommend people do that and not. I don't know, but 10 till 12 in the Watkins building every Saturday. We have free clothing, free shoes. People can take up to 6 items home with them that they need. And so that's one of the functions that we feed into that refugees can come to.
Yeah, that kind of thing is great. And if you ever want to get anything translated, we can help. Let me know.
So we actually use a lot of our people who come in have their phones and they hit translate, and we use the translator back and forth on the phones.
That's great.
But sometimes we get people who don't speak English, and we have to go through the hand motions. But it's difficult. But we haven't. I don't remember running across not being able to figure out what somebody needed or how to communicate enough so that they could get things to take home with them.
Yeah, that can be tough. But it sounds like y'all are already doing a good job. Even just being willing to work with someone and try to help them, I think goes a long way. So I'm glad to hear that, because there are plenty of people that are like, if you can't talk to me, I'm not going to talk to you. Jeez. A bummer.
A couple of things that I'll say kind of on what we have done, as you all know, this is happening, and we had KRM here just a couple of weeks ago in worship, but the board of the congregation also signed on to the Ash Wednesday Ecumenical Declaration, which you can find by going to cwsconnect.org /ecumenical -declaration. So because we are a longtime historic member of Church World Service, and because of KRM's relationship with Church World Service, we have that relationship, and we signed on to this pledge, which is a commitment to advocate for the refugee community in the midst of everything that's happening. Second, even though this doesn't directly impact refugees for some of the reasons that we heard about in terms of they're having more protections and being a little less vulnerable than a number of other populations in the United States. We do have a policy now that the board also adopted concerning what happens if ICE does show up in our congregation, and that primarily probably doesn't impact us on Sundays, but it does, as Vicki was talking about. We serve a number of populations on our with the community closet, with the thrift store, and with God's Pantry. So our outward-facing services, that is the main reason that we have the if ICE shows up policy.
Well, that was one of the things that I neglected to mention earlier. What we're seeing and what I've heard from around the country is not only the accompaniment aspect, but also the preparedness aspect. So that's something that we have been working to educate our clients about, but also our community, because I've heard of congregations having ICE drills.
Yeah.
So people know what to do, not just know what to do, but actually know what to do and how to do it. And I know of one that had done that kind of preparedness stuff, had ICE show up, and no one was taken. Like, they were able to not obstruct and not break any laws, but ICE didn't get who they were looking for. So that's something that we've also done at KRM. We haven't done a drill, but we've got a team of folks in place that are very familiar with what to do and are comfortable being point people for that. So not just for you all, but for others that you come in contact with. Like, I don't necessarily expect Kentucky to be a big target, but ICE also just got their budget multiplied by 100, so it's not going to get better anytime soon.
Do you know have there been any ICE raids in this area?
Not that I've known of that have been confirmed.
They've talked some about denaturalization. I've seen the term used. Is that strictly reserved at this point to going after people that say things they don't want to hear or get in their way? Or do you know?
I mean, I think I don't think we've seen any of that really happening yet. It's just been threatened a lot, right?
Okay.
And we have not seen them test the idea that you can denaturalize a natural born citizen, right? It's only people that have been naturalized. That's why it's denaturalization.
Mm-hmm.
There was talk of that during the first Trump administration, and they tried to do it. And, there's a lot of discretion given to the Secretary of State in those cases. But it's, we see how it is threatened or exercised in those cases, and it's clear what offenses they're trying to penalize or punish people for.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard of any actual specific instances of it yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was also something coming.
Yeah.
And
do you
trying to denaturalize actual native born citizens. Sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Do you feel like yourself, like you are under threat, or that KRM is under threat?
That's a tough question to answer. I think I am a citizen, but I wasn't born here. And I think the threat that I feel is less for myself and less for KRM because, whatever. The the stronger threat that I feel is for our democracy, and something that Katie Taylor, who used to work at KRM and now is the attorney at Neighbors Immigration Clinic, the thing that she said at the Lexington outreach meeting that has stuck with me ever since then is that we're seeing is not just a crisis of democracy, but it's the testing. And I've said this too, is like what we're seeing, what we're going to keep seeing is how strong the institutions are, but we're also going to see how flimsy they are. Because if we don't stand up as people in power, and a lot of us are not people, but if people in power do not stand up and fight for the institutions, fight for the social contracts that we have, we're going to find out how flimsy they are. And we're already finding out where the president can decide that a law just doesn't matter and he's not going to enforce it. And Congress is going to decide that it's okay for the president to take back money that they've appropriated. You know, like these institutions that the founders never really expected to just do these things. That is part of the crisis that we're facing and in the midst of in many ways. And immigration, refugees, asylum, all of these institutions, these ideas, these concepts are the front line for that crisis, because as we know from that poem, you know, first they came for the people that aren't me. And if you don't stand up and fight back, that's where, you know, they just keep pushing until those democratic backstops institutions are broken down. Another thing that has really stuck with me is I've listened to, I think it was a podcast a few months ago about what we can learn from similar situations that have happened in other places. So it was a researcher that had, her whole specialty is democratic collapse, like democratic backstop. And she offered up examples from Latin America and also from Europe of things that have worked and things that have not worked in the face of situations like this. And I can try and find it if we want to share it out. It was a really insightful conversation, but the things that she noted were that the biggest institution that needs to stay in some sort of power is the court. And that is something that I see talked about a lot in the legal community on social media, is that you can't give up. Yeah. You have to still push for legal remedies with the hope that the court will stand, right? Once we lose the courts, and some can argue we're already there, but we still have to have some hope. And that's kind of where I have to live, right? I have to have some hope that someday we will be past this, but right now we're fighting. And so the courts are a big part of it. The people are a big part of it. And if you've lost the representative government aspect, you got to keep fighting for free and fair elections. So standing up for keeping those elections, keeping the integrity there, right? Because without those two big factors, it makes it really hard to push back on authoritarianism.
A couple of weeks ago, George Conway, I think that's his name, George Conway wrote an editorial saying that court decisions really don't make any difference if you don't have somebody to enforce them.
But the thing is, and this is something that I'm not making up, I'm hearing it from lawyers, is it may feel that way, that nothing matters because the Trump administration is just doing whatever they want. They are complying. They're still playing ball. They're still going into hearings and participating. They're not being compliant in a lot of ways. They're not doing everything that the court is telling them to do, but they're still participating, right? And so we have to keep going under the assumption that we will keep participating, because once we lose that, the game is over.
Right.
And so we got to keep fighting in the courts, keep fighting to maintain our election integrity and our local governments, because that is one thing about the United States that we have in our favor. So we've got all of these different little localities that do things differently, and people have a lot of local power too, right? So like we've got our little bubble here in Lexington of people that want to be welcoming and want to have a strong economy and do all of those things, and we can fight to keep that the way it is too. You know, there are different levels of ways that we push back on authoritarianism, and some of it starts here and some of it goes all the way up. But it's a very overwhelming problem. I don't even know if you asked me about that, but that's
okay.
that's my 2 cents.
Too true.
We live in.
Are you noticing the time, Steve?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm aware of it. We have just a few minutes left, so if anybody has any questions you want to raise, this would be a good time to do it. Let me throw out another one. I'm not trying to cut off anybody, but let me throw out another one and address this both to you, Melissa, and to Brandon. In that document that Brandon was referencing earlier, it says that we are going to advocate on behalf of immigrants and refugees. Given the circumstances that we live in right now, what does it mean to advocate? What do we do to advocate?
I've been talking a lot. You get
Sure. Well, I think, I would say, a couple of things. I think one, you have to do the education piece, which, this that you all are participating in right now is part of that, as is having someone from KRM come and speak during worship. So that's one thing. Second thing is to use our financial resources to support organizations like Church World Service and KRM, which we do. And I think, to kind of further speak out and spread the word and educate people around, good policy, bad policy, the history, the difference between a refugee, an immigrant, and an asylum seeker. Sometimes that basic, education is part of advocacy as well, because people conflate those things and they think that they're angry about one thing when they're angry about something else. And it's important to kind of make those distinctions and help people understand all of the processes. I would add, actually, along with that education about that, educate, people about some of the countries where admitted refugees come from, so they understand the complexities of the violence that folks are escaping, or on the other hand, the very privileged positions that white Afrikaners are coming from, and why that's bad policy. We should probably stop recording at this point, but that's what I would say along those lines. It's always about education, it's always about raising awareness, and it's always about leveraging financial resources as well.
I would say it's also about assessing your own personal ability to be vocal about these things. For some people, it is not a safe option.
That's correct.
But for others who are in a relative position of privilege or just safety in general, putting yourself out there can be a really powerful way to advocate, whether that is joining a march and being at the front, seeing retired Quakers at the front of the line warms my heart every time. But for a lot of people, that is not a safe option, not a viable thing, and that is perfectly fine. But that's about understanding your personal level of risk and safety, also understanding ways to protect yourself if you are going to speak on behalf of the marginalized, oppressed, and persecuted. That is always going to be a dangerous position to be in. Hence your comment that we should probably stop recording. But, without those voices, again, we got to keep hoping that pushback will eventually bend that arc again towards justice. It is a dangerous place to be, but it is important. I think it is. And I think you all do too, or you wouldn't be here.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. We are, and that's a good positive note to end on in terms of keep pushing, keep working, keep pushing, keep extending effort and doing the kind of things like advocating that Brandon was describing and so forth. I definitely want to thank Connie Hubbard and their Justice Ministries for setting this up and making all the arrangements for this program this evening. And definitely want to thank Melissa for being with us. It's been very, very informative and interesting and very helpful. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. I was so glad to be here tonight.
And I'm glad we can record it so that we can share that with others too, that weren't able to be on. So
Thanks for you being present too, Brandon.
yes.
Oh yeah, glad to do it.
Yes, Brandon, thank you for contributing so well to this tonight. Also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glad to be here.
We want to send everybody forth with hope and peace. Go forth and do the work that we're called to do with hope and with peace and working for justice.